Coming up on our newscast, world leaders pledge greater military support for Ukraine. This comes as the country seeks to fend off a fresh Russian offensive. The IMF cut growth forecast for the world economy, citing the war in Ukraine and supply chain disruptions. The agency warns of even more crippling inflation in the coming months. South Korea's daily COVID-19 tally continues to decline. While various restrictions are lifted, mask wearing will still be required for the time being. Hello and welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Let's begin with our top story. Russia's ultimatum to Mariupol to surrender has passed amid heavy fighting and bombardment. Moscow has also reportedly laid out a new negotiation plan to Ukraine. Our Song Yoo-jin is standing by on the line with the latest. Yoo-jin, do fill us in.
Well, Daniel, attention is focused on Mariupol's Azovstal steel plant, where the remaining Ukrainian forces have gathered. After an earlier deadline to surrender passed on Tuesday, Russia's defense ministry again proposed to Ukrainian troops at the plant to lay down their arms until Wednesday, 2 p.m. local time. The deadline has now passed, and there are little signs that Ukrainian troops raised any white flags, with Russian-backed separatists saying that just 5 people had surrendered. This comes as approximately 100,000 civilians are estimated to remain in the city without basic supplies. A Mariupol police official told CNN that the city is falling short of food and water supplies amid heavy bombardment. However, there are signs of hope. The Ukrainian deputy prime minister took to Telegram on Wednesday to say that a humanitarian corridor has been agreed upon to evacuate women, children, and the elderly from the city. The city plans to evacuate 6,000 civilians with 90 buses. Meanwhile, Russia's large-scale offensive in eastern Ukraine is ongoing. Multiple media outlets, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, and the UK's Defense Ministry say Russia is building up its military presence and bombardments across the region, including in the cities of Kharkiv, Kramatorsk, Zaporizhia, and Dnipro. With such attacks continuing, the United Nations Refugee Agency has announced that more than 5 million Ukrainians have now escaped abroad since the invasion began on February 24th.
Eugene, peace talks between the two sides have been stalled since late March. However, we are hearing Russia submitted a fresh negotiation plan to Ukraine.
That's right, Daniel. According to Sputnik News, Russia's state-owned news agency, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov told reporters on Wednesday local time that Russia handed over a draft document, including clear proposals, to Ukraine. Although specific details were not revealed, Peskov added the ball is now in Ukraine's court and that Russia will be waiting for an answer. This is the first time in 3 weeks that Russia responded to Ukraine's negotiation plan, which was laid out during the two countries' fifth round of peace talks in Istanbul on March 29th. That's all I have for now. Back to you, Daniel.
All right, Eugene, thank you for those updates. We appreciate it. Moving on to other stories now, the IMF cut its growth forecast for the global economy to 3.6%, citing the war in Ukraine and supply chain disruptions. As for Korea, 2.5%. The agency expects an inflation rate of 4% this year. Kim Yeon-sung helps us look beyond the digits.
The International Monetary Fund on Tuesday announced its 2022 World Economic Outlook, and the growth forecast looks dim. The IMF estimated the global economy will grow 3.6% in 2022. That's 0.8% lower than the IMF's previous estimate announced back in January. It's also significantly lower than the global output in 2021, which was more than 6%. The global economy is weighed down by the pandemic, but perhaps even more heavily by Russia's war on Ukraine.
Global economic prospects have been severely set back, largely because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This crisis unfolds as the global economy has not yet fully recovered from the pandemic.
The war has also sharply pushed up prices. European consumer prices are expected to rise a whopping 12.6% this year. The region's GDP projections for 2022 has also been reduced to a mere 1.1%. South Korea also saw its potential growth cut. The country's 2022 outlook was lowered by half a percentage point to a new estimate of 2.5%. Consumer prices in South Korea are expected to rise 4%.
Experts forecast high inflation to continue for another year or two, but South Korea has preemptively raised interest rates. Because we raised the interest rate by 0.25 percentage points back in April, we have some wriggle room to deal with inflation.
This medium-term outlook bore bad news for all, except for the commodity traders who benefited from price hikes. Russia's invasion of Ukraine could leave long-lasting scars on the world's economy.
The war also increases the risk of a more permanent fragmentation of the world economy into geopolitical blocs with distinct technology standards, cross-border payment systems, and reserve currencies.
The most deeply scarred were the parties involved in the conflict. Russia's economy is expected to contract 8.5%. Ukraine is expected to shrink by 35%. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
And in view of the IMF's adjustments, the president of the Atlanta Federal Reserve is urging caution about raising interest rates too fast. In an interview with CNBC on Tuesday, Raphael Bostic warned such a move could undercut America's economic recovery. As for inflation, which in the U.S. is officially running at about 8.5%, he explained it could be topping out, but real incomes adjusted for cost of living have been going down. South Korea continues to report a decline in new COVID-19 cases. Wednesday tally as of midnight, 111,319, down 80,000 from a week ago. As of 6 p.m. local time, slightly over 70,000 more cases are reported. From next Monday, eating in indoor stadiums and movie theaters will be allowed. Stores can give out food samples and provide makeup services. Schools will fully reopen starting May 1st, with online classes used only as a last resort. But the government will require people to wear a mask at least until early May. Authorities are reviewing plans to bring back PCR tests as South Korea's main testing method to detect COVID-19. Son Young-rae highlighted that the country may make the switch for the general public with the virus tally on an overall downward trend. Officials previously introduced rapid antigen tests alongside PCR tests to help ease the burden on the medical system, following a steep increase in the number of tests being taken due to Omicron. Rapid antigen tests have shown to be relatively less accurate. The government will make a decision after further monitoring the test's accuracy. International travel is revived as the world comes out of the pandemic, and that includes South Korea. Flight tickets, though, have gone way up in terms of cost. The key driving factor is not just the demand, but a spike in jet fuel prices. Yoon sheds light on this phenomenon.
If we look on a flight comparison website, flights to New York for next week cost 2,090,000 Korean won. That's roughly $1,700 US. This is a significant hike from the roughly $1,200 for the same route on March 11th, just before the lifting of the travel quarantine was announced. And before the COVID-19 pandemic, this same route was under $1,050. But with the latest rise in demand for overseas travel, such discounted prices are impossible to get. The outbreak of the war in Ukraine has caused the soar in international oil prices, which is reflected in airfare as well. For U.S. route flights for next month, Korean Air charges around $200 in fuel tax, and Asiana Airline charges $160, which is more than 3 times higher than it was in February 2021. Despite such rises, demand for travel is also on a sharp increase. Just a week before the quarantine exemption was announced, there were only some 675 sales of travel packages. But after the announcement, that number increased more than twofold in the space of a week and has increased roughly 20% every week since. In just 1 month, the number of travel package sales have increased 442%. Most of the demand is for flights to the U.S. or Europe, where much of the quarantine restrictions for arriving travelers have been lifted. Airlines have been working hard to increase the number of international flights in a rush to bring flights back to normal, but the number of flights are at a mere 12% compared to before the pandemic. Industry analysts expect this number to only rise to 50% by the end of the year, which means continued high demand for travel will keep discounted airfare scarce and prices will remain high for the time being. 이은진, 아리랑 뉴스.
The Presidential Transition Committee chair shared his opinion on the current government's COVID-19 related measures and also emphasized it's a bit too early for the country to let its guard down completely. The incoming administration also announced its policies on nuclear power plants as well as the nation's startup scene. Kim Do-yeon brings the updates.
The chairman of the Presidential Transition Committee, An Chol-soo, has expressed concern over the current government's loosening of COVID-19 measures. On Wednesday, through the committee's spokesperson, An said that he is aware that the government is looking to downgrade COVID-19's danger level as an infectious disease and also get rid of the outdoor mask mandate.
There's still 100,000 new cases a day with at least 100 deaths. The immunity level for over 60s is declining. Experts in and outside the country all warn of another wave in this fall or winter, and there are still remaining threats from the variants after Omicron.
The spokesperson also added that the committee delivered its opinion on the current government's plan to get rid of mandatory isolation for the infected by late May, saying that it is a hasty decision. The committee also said that getting back to pre-COVID-19 days is not the direction the country needs to take. Instead, while it may be a bit inconvenient, the country needs to go towards creating ways for society to safely coexist with COVID-19. Meanwhile, the committee also announced more plans for its shift towards using more nuclear power plants. The Science, Technology and Education Division of the committee announced Wednesday that the request period to extend the lifetime of a nuclear power plant will be 5 to 10 years before expiration, up from 2 to 5 years.
If the policy changes like this, during the next administration, there will 18 power plants that can apply for lifetime extension, up from 10.
Another announcement came from the president-elect's youth side, Chang Hae-chan, who said the incoming government will transform the current startup scene to something that has negative regulation, which means anything that's not prohibited by law will be possible. He said this will foster new types of businesses in the country and help them be successful. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
President-elect Yoon is on a 3-day tour of the southern part of the country. The focal point, deregulation to attract more investments to these areas. On Wednesday, he was in the Honam region. Yoon Jung-min reports.
Visiting the National Pension Service on Wednesday in Cheonju, Jeollabuk-do Province, President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol said his policies will focus on lifting as many regulations as possible to secure more investment. He also said that when companies prosper, there is a positive impact on their employees too.
누구든지 우리 국민이든 우리 기업이든 외국인이든 해외 기업이든 간에 우리나라에서 마음껏 돈 벌 수 있게 해준다. 그리고 저희는 세금만 받으면 되는 겁니다.
On his way to the region, Yoon took an aerial tour of Saemangum, a tidal flat where the world's biggest seawall has reclaimed a huge amount of land, which he said he will make an attractive area for businesses. He stressed the need to deregulate in the region, mentioning China's strategy of attracting foreign companies. President-elect Yoon also visited a construction site in Gwangju for an artificial intelligence complex and pledged to help make the city a Korean version of Silicon Valley.
인재 양성과 R&D, 창업 지원을 위한 각종 세제와 법적, 제도적, 재정적 지원을 아끼지 않겠습니다.
Yoon also visited a number of industrial sites in Yeongam and yet again urged the need for deregulation, saying there are delays in securing foreign workers due to too much regulation. On Wednesday, the president-elect kicked off a 3-day tour to the south of the country in the Jeollado provinces and Gwangju, as well as Busan and Gyeongsang-namdo province. His spokesperson said the purpose of the trip is to fulfill his campaign pledge to revisit these areas and to look after the livelihoods of their people. Yoon's team dismissed claims that there is a political motivation ahead of the local elections in June. Last week, he visited the conservative strongholds of Daegu and Gyeongsang-buk-do. On Tuesday, the president-elect had dinner with U.S. nuclear envoy Sung Kim, who is visiting Seoul this week. But Yoon's spokesperson dismissed any diplomatic interpretations, saying it was only a private meeting organized by lawmaker Chung Jin-seok. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Seoul's foreign minister nominee met with Washington's top nuke envoy to discuss ways to coordinate on North Korea policies. Park Jin said the new government will closely communicate and cooperate with the U.S. from day one to maintain the allies' watertight posture as North Korea's latest missile launches pose a great threat to regional peace and stability. Agreeing with that, Sung Kim said the Biden administration looks forward to working with the Yoon administration and vowed to prioritize bilateral cooperation amid instability on the peninsula. Satellite imagery appears to show North Korea getting ready to put on a military parade, likely for its military's founding anniversary. Often the regime uses these events to show off new strategic weapons. Han Sung-woo provides a deeper analysis.
North Korea, ahead of Monday's 90th anniversary of the founding of its People's Revolutionary Army, appears to be preparing for a large-scale military parade. Radio Free Asia reports that more than 12,000 troops gathered on Sunday at the parade training grounds at Mirim Airfield in eastern Pyongyang, citing satellite imagery provided by U.S.-based Planet Labs. The pictures showed the troops marching in formation along with scores of vehicles. The day after, 22 fighter jets and 11 helicopters were seen lined up near one of Sunan International Airport's main runways, likely to be flown over Pyongyang as part of the parade. And based on pictures from Sunday and Monday, there were crowds of people not described as military at Kim Il-sung Square, which is where the parade, if held, will take place on or around April 25th. This would appear to indicate that preparations are in their final stage. Voice of America describes the people in the square as holding red flowers and making formations. South Korea's military and intelligence officials are not ruling out the possibility of the parade being held at night. One informed source said Monday that North Korea could mobilize as many as 20,000 troops and a range of military equipment, including armored vehicles and transporter erector launchers used to fire missiles. The source noted the regime could even showcase its intercontinental and submarine-launched ballistic missiles. This came as the United States stationed the USS Alexandria, an attack submarine, in Yokosuka, Japan on Monday, not long after the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group conducted a naval exercise in the East Sea with Japan last week, amid growing concerns of North Korean provocations. Han Sung-woo, Arirang News.
April 20th is South Korea's Disabled Persons Day. It's dedicated to raising awareness on what should be done to ensure the rights of this group. Shin Young went out to find out the challenges they face and what must be done to provide better protection.
South Korea's public transport is well known for being quick and convenient, but it isn't quite as convenient for the 1 out of 20 Koreans who are disabled. I'm using a wheelchair myself to go to a nearby subway station that's roughly 600 meters away from where I am right now. Now, it's my first time on one of these, so let's see how it goes. Now, I've arrived at the station, but as you can see, there's no way for me to go up. I would have to find a different entrance or exit with an elevator. And I've learned how inconvenient it is to use a wheelchair for even just a few minutes. I can't imagine how much disabled people have to go through having to use wheelchairs on a daily basis. That's why I went to find out what difficulties they face every day. Pang Myung-hee has been paralyzed since she was just 11 months old. She's soon to turn 60 and needs a wheelchair to get around. And she says this hasn't been an easy task.
The front wheels of a wheelchair are very small. It's very dangerous whenever you're trying to get on the subway because there's a wide gap between the platform and boarding area, so the wheels can slip in. While electric wheelchairs have bigger wheels, they take up much more space. So when it's crowded on the subway, you can sense that other passengers are disturbed by your presence.
To put a spotlight on the issues facing people with disabilities, South Korea sets aside April 20th every year as the country's Disabled Persons Day and holds many nationwide events. To mark the day, the Seoul metropolitan government has decided to operate buses and taxis specialized for the disabled, free of charge. The country has also launched many rehabilitation centers to help the disabled keep fit and learn vocational skills. Seoul Community Rehabilitation Center was one of the first built in the country.
We provide customized rehabilitation and educational programs for the disabled and closely interact with the local community. Our centre poses an exemplary one-step model for other countries like Japan and Vietnam to use as a blueprint.
In just 40 years, South Korea has launched some 250 centers for the disabled, helping them live their lives and raising awareness of issues that they face. 신예은, Arirang News.
Mild conditions will continue tomorrow with temperatures close to that of early summer. With the rise in the readings, dry spells are persisting across the nation. In fact, advisories are in place for more than half of the country, including the capital area. For Gangwon-do province, where gusty winds are also in the forecast, a forest fire advisory is in place, so please take extra care. Light raindrops will be falling for the south coast and Jeju Island tomorrow. Rain accumulations will be minor with about 5 millimeters expected. The warming trend continues for the rest of the country, but big contrast in temperatures are expected. Most regions will see a difference of more than 10 degrees, so make sure to dress in layers. Morning lows will be 1 to 4 degrees warmer than today. Seoul will start off warm at 10 degrees Celsius. As for the daily highs, Busan will get up to 19 degrees. Gwangju, Chuncheon, and Gyeongju will reach 24 degrees Celsius. Brief showers are in the forecast for the Seoul metropolitan area this coming Friday. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
And that's all from us. As always, thank you for watching.